Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on clinical SAS programming. So one of the user has asked me to explain or understand how to easily remember some of the timing variables in SDTM domains. So we will try to see examples for events or interventions domain and also findings domain in this video. So for events or interventions, most of the time point variables are common. So only the abbreviation or the two-letter abbreviation of the domain changes between these two. So we will try to see the examples in terms of interventions domains. In particular, we'll see the examples using concomitant medications as example. So I have used three use cases here. So the first one has the medication, which says say for example, if someone has asked like what are the medications you have taken and the subject has indicated specific medication. So and he or she has indicated that the medication was started on 5th Jan 2010 and ended on 31st December 2010. So in these cases we precisely know the start date of the medication and also the end date of the medication. So we'll try to identify the variables that will be used to capture this information. So as this information is related to medication which is stored in SDTM concomitant medications, so the two-letter abbreviation for that would be CM. So and as this information is related to the start of the medication, so we would be using ST for start. As this information is date time, so we will use the three character like that DTC as to indicate that it is a date time value. So concomitant medication start DTC. So this information of 5th Jan 2010 is meant to be put in CMST DTC variable. And similarly, so we know that the medication has clearly ended on 31st December 2010. So as it is concomitant medication, so the two-letter abbreviation for it is CM. As this is related to the end date of something, so the two-letter abbreviation for it is EN. And as this is a date time value, so we will put it in a variable called DTC. So the overall variable is CM EN DTC. So when we clearly know the start and end date values, so we put the information in CMST DTC and CM EN DTC. Say similarly, if it is medical history, so the two-letter abbreviation for CM would be replaced with MH. So now let us take the second scenario wherein the subject has stated that I have started it before 5th Jan 2010 and ended it somewhere after 31st December 2010. So here in this case, the dates reported 5th Jan 2010 in terms of start and 31st December 2010 are not the exact start and end dates. So here is for such cases, we have a concept called as start related to a time point and end related to a time point. So this time point variable would be kept in a separate variable and the status related to that time point would be kept in a separate variable. So here the variable that will be used to store the time point is, as this is concomitant medication, so CM, and as this is related to the start of something, so we will have to use ST, and we are talking about the time point. So this date value of 5th Jan 2010 would be kept in a variable called CM STTPT. So the and then the status related to this of this medication with respect to the date value reported in CM STTPT would be put in a variable called. So let's again start with the two-letter abbreviation for concomitant medication. So CM, as this is related to start. So the RTPT. So start related to the time point. So the 5th Jan 2010 would go and set in CMSTTPT variable and the value before would be kept in CMSTRTPT. So someone reviewing the SDTM dataset would clearly know that the medication was started before 5th Jan 2010. So similarly for end date, this 31st December would be put in a variable called, so let's try to identify it again. So as this is related to medication, so it would be CM, and this is related to end of something. So the two-letter abbreviation for it is EN, and as this is the time point, it's not clearly the end date here as in the first case, or as it is the time point, so we would put it in a variable called CM EN TPT, and this after would be put in a variable called CM EN R TPT. So end related to the time point value specified in ENTPT. So we would put the value of 31st December in ENTPT, and the value after would be put in a variable called CMENRTPT. Now let's come back to this third scenario wherein the sponsor defined reference period is from the RF variable in SDTM domain to RF variable in, let me correct this, the reference period for a study which is defined by the sponsor would be indicated by the date values of RF and RF in demographics domain. So let's say the medication collection is proceeded in this way. So they are checking whether the medication was started before the reference period for this before the start of the reference period for this study. And here in this case, the subject has reported that the medication has ended after, or the investigator is sure that the medication has been stopped only after the reference end date. So a sponsor defined reference period end date. So in this case, so we know the reference start date and reference end date values, and these are already present in SDTM DM domain. So in that case, we don't need a specific TPT variable again. So we put the status of this started before and after in a variable called CM STRF. So this is start related to the reference start date CMENRF. So this is end related to the reference period, which ends at RFENDTC. So when the collection is made in terms of the sponsor defined reference period, so we use CMSTRF to capture the status of the start of something with reference to RFSTDTC. If we are interested in seeing or understanding the date value for this reference start date reference period, we can always go back and check the date value in RFSTDTC variable in DM domain. Similarly, if we are interested in checking the status or the date value associated with the reference period end, so we can go back and check the RFENDTC variable in demographics domain. Yes. Now let us try to identify some of the timing variables that would be needed in findings domains. So we'll try to remember those things with this statement. So let's say in the protocol we have this sentence which says collect 3 blood samples for PK evaluation on the day of, this must have been day 1. So on the day of day 1 dose. So and those 3 time points are 10 minutes before the dose, 1 hour after the dose, and 2 hours after the dose. So and we will have the actual collection time. So the actual collection time would be stored in a variable called PCDTC, as this is PK evaluation result concentration values are stored in a variable called in a domain called PC. So all the variable will have a suffix of the suffix of PC, as this is related to the pharmacokinetic concentrations. So the actual collection time for these 3 blood samples on day 1 dose would be captured in a variable called PCDTC, which is sample data time. So that value will be reported in ISO 8601 date time format. And then, so we have this nominal time point, which is says day 1 dose. So that value would be put in a variable called PCTPT ref, which is the time point reference. So we are talking about day 1 dose, and this day 1 dose would have an actual dose timing. So that dose timing value would be put in a variable called PCRFTTTC, date time of time point of reference. So here the time point of reference is day 1 dose, and we actually have the exact timing of that value is put in this PCRFT DTC, reference time point date time value. And then we have mentioned that the collection would be made at three different time points. Those three time point values or the nominal time point values would be put in a variable called PCTPT. And then there is a associated numeric variable which could be used for sorting. That value would be put in a variable called PCTPT num. So, and we have one additional variable called planned elapsed time. So here we know the dose time and we also know the collection time. So here we will get to know the actual difference between the timing of the dose and the timing of the collection. But we also need the planned time elapsed time. So which means we are talking about collection of some sample at 10 minutes before dose, 1 hour after dose, and 2 hour after dose. So we are keeping the nominal values in TPT, but we are expressing that duration in ISO format in PCELTM variable, which is used to capture the planned elapsed time. So this negative sign here indicates that the value is before the PC TPT ref. So and T is for time, 10 is for duration, and M is for minutes. Similarly, in other two records, P is for period, T is for time, and 1 here indicates that 1 and H indicates hour. So this is 1 hour after day 1 dose and 2 hour after day 1 dose. So for the ones which have to be before, we are indicating it with a minus sign. So we have the same information of this exact 1 hour, 2 hour or before and after dose where information will be captured in PCELTM. So let's try to recap it again. So collect 3 blood samples for PK evaluation on the day of day 1 dose. So this we are talking about the collection of samples in terms of a reference time point. That nominal reference time point would be put in a variable called PCTPT and the actual timing of that reference uh, time point would be put in a variable called PC and the actual time of collection of the samples would be put in a variable called PCDTC and the three nominal time points would be put in a variable called PCTPT and the associated numeric version would be stored in a variable called PCTPT num and we have this durations reported durations are indicated, so which can be converted into ISO durations. That related planned elapsed time information is captured in a variable called PCELTM. So hope this is helpful. Thank you for watching and keep learning.